Here are the natural English translations for both versions. Hello and welcome back, dear viewers, to the latest episode of Top Secret. Ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam, a small yet beautiful country, humbly nestled on the beloved S-shaped strip of land. Having gone through thousands of years of history filled with upheavals and vicissitudes. Throughout history, we have faced countless formidable enemies. The eel harbors a plot to wipe Vietnam off the world map. So, who are those countries? Why do they want to destroy us? Let's explore the fun secrets in this issue together. First and foremost, let's mention our close friend from the north, China. Why do they want to destroy us? Throughout history, Vietnam, though a small nation, has resolutely defeated many formidable enemies. For 1,000 years under northern invaders' domination, yet our people never once submitted, determined to drive them out and reclaim independence. Still preserves the unique traditional cultural identity of their people. This is China's expansionist and hegemonic policy aimed at imposing its will on our country. According to Dr. Vong, for thousands of years, befriending the distant while attacking the nearby, train in a distant land, strike in a neighboring country close to Vietnam. Sometimes China establishes relations with Vietnam, but in reality, it's only a temporary strategy. Strategically, China has always harbored expansionist ambitions and has never abandoned its designs for invasion. Vietnam's Bai became a province of China. Historically, there was a time when China aided Vietnam. But overall, China has always harbored the ambition to annex Vietnam. That is the very nature of China. Dr. Vong emphasized the need to clearly recognize the aggressive nature of China's actions. To avoid misunderstandings or lack of clarity in propaganda work. This becomes even more critical as China simultaneously seeks to invade Vietnam's Paracel Islands. In 1974, they used force to occupy and illegally place drilling rigs on our continental shelf. Leveraging Vietnam's economic advantages while preserving its enduring historical values. Vietnam is blatantly slandered, even falsely accused to the United Nations. Vietnam was the party that actively escalated tensions surrounding the Hai Duong 981 oil rig. Even Vu falsely accused Vietnamese ships of deliberately ramming into Chinese vessels over 1,400 times. China has countless reasons to want to seize the South China Sea. Among these, notably, is an engine related to objects located deep on the ocean floor. China is actively competing with the world's leading powers in the global economic race. The 21st century shines with the conquest of the clean energy market, gradually replacing fossil fuels. China does not hide its ambition to become the leading nation in producing high-end batteries that meet future transportation demands and energy savings for modern electronic devices used in communication and business. With the ability to mitigate climate change, at the same time, China is striving to become the world leader in modern power generation. In the Made in China 2025 plan, China focuses on developing high-tech sectors such as semiconductor manufacturing, aerospace, and robotics. Meanwhile, rare earth elements are indispensable for producing these high-end batteries and advanced electronic devices. The exploitation of abundant rare earth resources will play a crucial role in the robust development of these industries next year. A study from the US indicates that China views maintaining its leading position in the rare earth sector as a critical strategic objective. Over the past 30 years, China has consistently maintained its position as the world's leading producer and exporter of rare earth elements. China currently remains the country producing over 90% of the world's rare earth supply. This country has sufficient market power to regulate the prices and output of essential goods. Just as Saudi Arabia has the ability to control the global oil market, China can adjust rare earth exports by restricting or expanding them to control prices and supply as desired. China is currently facing two potential risks threatening its rare earth supply. First and foremost, against the backdrop of China's continuously growing economy and expanding middle class. The Chinese government may have considered that the country's major inland rare earth mines could be depleted. Second, China has successfully expanded its supply of raw rare earths from countries such as North Korea. But ensuring long-term stability for external supply sources remains an unanswered question. Facing this threat, China turned to the sea in search of additional rare earth supplies. The East Sea floor holds abundant mineral resources, known as manganese nodules. China currently possesses the world's most advanced deep-sea mineral mining technology, and demonstrating superior capability in exploiting potential deposits of non-ferrous metals and rare earth elements. Facing the new regulations issued by international seabed management organizations, China sees this as the optimal solution to maintain a stable supply of seabed minerals. And the offshore rare earth supply has turned these regions into their territory. And to achieve that goal, the annihilation of Vietnam is a prerequisite. Besides China, Cambodia is another country that has always sought to eliminate us. The first factor leading to commitment likely stems from history. The Khmer Kingdom is situated between two powerful neighboring countries, Vietnam and Thailand. Gradually, the land was lost due to various reasons. Therefore, every nation harbors some degree of resentment toward its neighboring countries. Due to unavoidable conflicts during the territorial border demarcation process, for Cambodians, the loss of part of the once mighty Khmer Empire's territory is due to a history of upheaval. This may help explain why Cambodia has always harbored a deep resentment toward the Thai people, and never truly trusted the Vietnamese people. When Vietnam harbored ambitions to establish an anti-French alliance across all of Indochina, directly involved in supporting the establishment of the Revolutionary Communist Party of Kampuchea. The predecessor of the Communist Party of Cambodia was the Khmer Rouge, and the two became close allies. However, beneath the facade of an ally lies an undying hatred for the loss of their country. The Khmer Rouge accused Vietnam of plotting to form an Indochina Federation. Blush. Due to the two reasons above, the Khmer Rouge demanded that Vietnam return their ancestral land. With a much smaller number of troops, the Khmer Rouge relentlessly carried out bloody massacres along the Vietnam-Cambodia border. Over 300,000 people lost their lives. On April 14, 1977, the Vietnamese government still sent a congratulatory message to the Khmer Rouge regime. After 2 years of operation, 2 weeks later, precisely on April 30th, they responded to that wish. The Khmer Rouge forces suddenly launched a direct attack on the two provinces of An Giang and Chau Doc, harming hundreds of innocent civilians. Vietnam resisted, but in the end could no longer endure the relentless conflicts and brutal, blood-soaked actions. You claim that Cambodia is colluding with China. Vietnam officially announces the termination of its alliance relations. At that point, it only existed in name and overthrew the Khmer Rouge regime by force. Using the pretext that the Khmer Rouge committed genocide, the Vietnamese army entered Cambodia, liberated the country, and overthrew the regime of Pol Pot, a former ally who later betrayed them. In 2012, the Cambodia National Rescue Party, CNRP, was established, and by 2013, the party had participated in the election. General election faces off against the Cambodian People's Party, where the sugar palm trees grow. The ancient land of the Cham people once stretched all the way to that place. A portion of the Cambodian population, primarily monks who benefited from the old regime, still cling to the past. London and the Khmer Rouge openly opposed and sabotaged. In this race, the Cambodian National Rescue Party, CNRP, also repeatedly organized activities. The peak occurred in 2017 when the number of border violations into Vietnamese territory orchestrated by the CNRP continued to rise. Vietnam is compelled to heighten its defense alert level. In 2014, the American peacekeeping force FISHCOP became the subject of an investigation by the Kampuchea Security Bureau. According to available information, the establishment of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, CNRP, also reflects the influence of the Cambodian People's Party, CPP, over other politicians and political parties within the government. To balance the power of Hussein's Kampuchea family faction, in 2017, the Kampuchean government's FISHCOP peacekeeping force was forced to withdraw its troops from the country. That year, the Kampuchea Supreme Court ruled to dissolve the CNRP party on charges of treason. The plot to overthrow the current government through illegal actions. From then on, the argument that the Kampucheans hated Vietnam began to spread and grow increasingly widespread. Since 2014, this ideological current has taken root among a segment of the Vietnamese population, with backing from the Cambodia National Rescue Party, CNRP, and external forces. The schemes to undermine Vietnam-Cambodia solidarity, as well as the plots to overthrow Prime Minister Hun Sen's government, are all condemnable acts. Surprisingly, even seemingly unrelated countries like Thailand also want to wipe us out. Why is that? Historically, the Thai and Vietnamese people have no long-standing feud. Their greatest enemy was the Burmese. Their most memorable recollection of Vietnam-Thailand friendship is tied to two historical figures: Emperor Nguyen An and President Ho Chi Minh. Nguyen An once aided the Thai in their fight against Myanmar, then borrowed Thai troops to return and attack the Tay Son dynasty. President Ho Chi Minh once lived in Thailand and left many beautiful memories there. And laying the foundation for Vietnam-Thailand friendship, the film Chow Chin in Siam is about to be released. The Thais see the Vietnamese as their key regional competitor. Militarily, the Thais held Vietnam in high regard and were cautious in their approach. I admire Vietnam for daring to stand up against France, America, and China, and emerging victorious. Afraid because Vietnam's military force is overwhelmingly powerful. The US and supporters of South Vietnam spread propaganda claiming we were brutal communists plotting to dominate all of Southeast Asia. Politically, Vietnam and Thailand compete for influence in the Indo-Chinese peninsula and the Dang Thang region. Deeply influenced Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar. Within the ASEAN region, Vietnam is asserting its position as a leading nation with significant political influence. Although Vietnam only joined in 1995, but, economically, although Vietnam is currently less developed than Thailand, in the medium and long term, the Thais are facing fierce competition from Vietnam, especially in the fields of digitalization, agriculture, consumer goods manufacturing, and attracting foreign direct investment, FDI. Culturally, Vietnam and Thailand each possess their own distinctive characteristics, and harmoniously complement each other, with no contradictions or conflicts. The Thai people deeply admire Vietnam for its political stability and tight security. The people of Thailand always yearn for a stable and peaceful society like Vietnam's. Many major corporations and Thai investors are rushing to seek opportunities in Vietnam due to its more attractive profit margins. Uniforms in Vietnam are safer than in Thailand, where political instability still persists. The Thai people deeply respect the king and the princess, but they do not seem to favor the crown prince. They have no shortage of stories condemning the corruption and decadence of the royal family, especially those involving the crown prince. Many Thais express a preference for Vietnam's political model. The Thais also greatly admire the Vietnamese because the Vietnamese expatriate community living in Thailand is exceptionally talented. Although in the past, relations between Vietnam and Thailand were not always positive. Thailand has a large Vietnamese population, but the overseas Vietnamese community here maintains a more luxurious and affluent lifestyle compared to the average. However, it still doesn't compare to the Chinese. To date, the Vietnamese community in Thailand has been treated fairly and holds a stable position in Thai society. Thailand and Vietnam once shared a close cooperative relationship, though they never formally became allies. The two governments have held multiple intergovernmental meetings. In reality, due to internal political instability in Thailand, this form of cooperation could not be sustained consistently. However, the Thai people still believe that Vietnam and Thailand are the two leading nations in Southeast Asia, jointly holding a dominant role in ASEAN. Vietnam serves as a crucial military backer and becomes a shield protecting Thailand as well as the entire Southeast Asian region from the threat of Chinese expansion. On the other hand, Southeast Asia can hardly maintain stability without Vietnam's cooperation in the security sector. Long ago, the Thai people were deeply afraid that Vietnam would send troops to invade. But now, they have come to understand that Vietnam always cherishes peace, only resolutely opposing any acts of aggression and interference from major powers. This has earned them immense admiration. Here are the neutral yet natural English translations for your options. In Thailand, the economy is primarily driven by the private sector. Unlike Vietnam, the government does not fully control the economy. In Thailand, the wealthy class primarily belongs to the royal family. However, they are essentially just private individuals, and most have Chinese ancestry. Thailand and Vietnam do not share similar GDP levels. Vietnam's GDP is about 1/3 that of Thailand, but the total assets held by the Vietnamese government are larger than the public holdings of the Thai government. The Thai people believe that the Vietnamese are not poorer than them. However, in Vietnam, many goods are priced higher than in Thailand, so the standard of living is not as comfortable as that of the Thai people. The cost of living in Vietnam is higher than in Thailand, especially with significantly more expensive car and motorcycle prices. Vietnam could catch up to Thailand's economy within the next 20 to 30 years. Throughout history, besides the aforementioned nations, two other powers also sought to annex our country: colonial France and imperialist America. It can be affirmed that, for France, the crisis of the Vietnamese feudal government in the first half of the 19th century was one of the main causes leading to the French military invasion. The authorities implemented repressive measures to suppress the people's struggle movement in feudal society. Numerous uprisings against the regime erupted, but all were crushed by brutal and bloody crackdowns. The government blindly carried out foreign policies, obediently submitting to the Qing dynasty, enforcing harsh laws, closing off the nation, and refusing trade with friendly countries. This is a major challenge for our people. Due to the lockdown policy, domestic merchants cannot trade with foreign partners. This situation has led to the current consequence where farmers are facing a surplus of unsold goods. Life was already hard, but now it has become even more arduous and desperate. The abolition of progressive reforms during the Tay Son era caused the country's economy to stagnate. Economic sectors such as agriculture, handicrafts, and commerce lacked the conditions to develop, making people's lives extremely difficult. On top of that, they also faced exorbitant taxes and levies, along with relentless natural disasters and epidemics. The conflict between the Nguyen dynasty court and the people grew increasingly severe, leading to a series of uprisings against the feudal regime. From the reign of Zhao Long to the early period of French colonial rule, there were nearly 500 peasant-led uprisings. This plunged the Nguyen dynasty into a state of crisis. Due to the rise of capitalism, the demand for market expansion and colonies grew increasingly urgent. Western nations intensified their invasions of Eastern countries to seize resources and extend their spheres of influence. Trung recognized that Vietnam held a strategically vital position, abundant in resources and minerals. This was precisely the lucrative prize that the French colonialists had long coveted. The subjective reasons mentioned also played a significant role. At that time, Vietnam's feudal regime was in severe crisis, creating favorable conditions for its annexation. Additionally, Vietnam is located at the crossroads of Indochina, with a maritime transportation system that is advantageous for goods movement. However, this very position also makes our country vulnerable to becoming a target of invasion. After invading Vietnam, neighboring countries would become the next targets. Vietnam has a large population but relatively low educational attainment, making it a potential source of cheap labor. During feudal times, our people lived under oppression and misery, without enough food to eat or warm clothes to wear, let alone the opportunity for education. That was an immense disadvantage. In reality, France saw this as beneficial to them. If they could control Vietnam, it would become a vital source of labor and production. Vietnam is a key consumer market for French goods. This contributes to strengthening and sustaining France's economic growth. For the United States, after World War II, when the national liberation movements of Third World countries surged powerfully. Concerned about the influence of communism and the threat of Soviet expansion, the U.S. was compelled to build a sufficiently strong regional police force to counter it. According to U.S. leaders, China possesses overwhelming advantages in population size, territorial area, and strategic geographic location in Asia, enough to build a formidable political military foundation. Taking on the role of the world's police, how would non-communist countries that are less friendly with the U.S. fare if they fell under the influence of communism? Meanwhile, Vietnam, another country in Southeast Asia, established a communist government in August 1945. In January 1950, the Soviet Union and China officially recognized this independence and began providing aid and support. According to the domino theory of American politicians, if not stopped in time, communism from the Soviet Union and China would spill over into Vietnam, then spread across all of Southeast Asia. The rapid expansion of communism across Southeast Asia will threaten the position of the United States at its military bases along China's coastline. The situation in the Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, North Korea, and the Pacific offshore regions is becoming increasingly unstable, posing a serious threat to the security and interests of the United States in East Asia. The actual situation in Vietnam serves as clear evidence of this issue. Before the period of 1945 to 1950, the U.S. had quietly sought to establish its influence in Vietnam. President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared, Over the past year, I have consistently expressed the view that Indochina should not be returned to France but must instead be placed under international administration. On August 22, a significant event took place when French President de Gaulle flew to Washington to hold talks with US President Truman. The French government announced the establishment of a new regime in Indochina. This government will consist of both native inhabitants and French expatriates, headed by a representative of the French government. At the same time, French troops entering Indochina will disarm the Japanese forces. This plan was rejected by the White House, as the US only wanted military forces to take on this task. The solution the Japanese forces sought was to gain control over Vietnam through a puppet government they had set up. However, later on, due to disputes between the US and Britain, the US was forced to compromise by using the 16th parallel as the boundary to divide spheres of influence in Vietnam. North of the 16th parallel was controlled by the pro-American Nationalist Army, while the area south of this line was taken over by the pro-British French forces. At this moment, it is necessary to focus all efforts to counter the Chinese Communist Party. At the same time, having received many benefits from France, on February 28, 1946. With the Franco-Chinese Treaty, it was believed that the 16th parallel had been ceded to France. However, the US has not abandoned its ambitions toward Vietnam's weakness against the strength of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. President Truman announces an aid plan for France, aimed at gradually reclaiming control of Vietnam from the country. The US policy is to both threaten to escalate the war and vigorously maintain and reinforce the puppet government along with its puppet military forces. The US is preparing to take control and will soon replace France's position in Indochina. The US aimed to prolong the war to weaken both France and Vietnam, creating favorable conditions for intervention in Indochina. After the decisive victory at Dien Bien Phu, Vietnam forced France to sign the Geneva ceasefire agreement. Moreover, since the military intervention prolonged the war in Korea, the US broke the deadlock and secured a victory, laying a crucial foundation to accelerate the militarization trend in its foreign policy. The US Congress has increased defense spending compared to previous levels. At the same time, the allied nations within the US-Japan Treaty and the Anschutz NATO bloc will support all US actions in Vietnam. To ensure that US security commitments remain as valid as originally intended. At that time, everything seemed to be in place for the US to replace France's position. Therefore, the US pressured France to quickly sign a ceasefire agreement in Vietnam. And immediately, the US implemented a plan to replace France in Vietnam as well as across all of Indochina. Against the backdrop of France's ailing economy, political turmoil, and internal strife. Once again faced with the Algerian People's War of Independence, France was forced to concede to the US and withdraw its troops from Vietnam. From a party involved, they only provided military support to France. After 1954, the US replaced France and became the invading force in Vietnam. Starting cautiously, even with a bit of skepticism, it wasn't until 1955 that the United States has been gradually stepping up its efforts. The goal is to build an entirely new South Vietnam from the ground up. Using them as a shield, the rest of the periphery realized. In reality, if the United States adheres to the principles of internationalism, it will receive its rightful reward. Taking a comprehensive look at US policies, the White House administration has exploited anti-communist rhetoric to incite and sway public opinion. The parliament supports budget spending and also plays a leading role among allied nations. To expand global influence, whether in reality or not, the Communist Democratic Republic of Vietnam was established in 1945. Nothing has changed except for the outward appearance. Economic sanctions or military intervention may be applied. Therefore, we can gain a clearer understanding of the Second Indochina War. The US pursued this goal to prevent the expansion of communism. And national power is used to realize the dream of hegemony, a goal that the White House leadership has always pursued.